Colleen Hoover might be the most popular author working right now. With millions of books sold and one of the most dedicated fan bases I can think of, the movie adaptation of her novel, It Ends With Us, just came out. Today on the podcast, what Colleen Hoover's popularity tells us about what audiences want. I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Look, maybe I should begin by catching you up. Colleen Hoover has one of those unbelievable Cinderella publishing stories. They just don't come along very often. She was a social worker in Texas. She started self-publishing her books, and then now she's a best-selling author. I'm talking millions of books sold. Her fans call her Coho for short. Whatever. That's good for me. Colleen's most popular novel, It Ends With Us, was just adapted into a movie that's out right now, and it's a box office smash. It starts off as a romance between two really hot people, played by Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. Baldoni also directed the movie, but their relationship descends into dark and violent territory. Before we get started, I want to just say, just like a heads up, this conversation might be difficult for some listener. Sadaf, Ahsan, and CT Jones are both here to talk about the movie and Colleen Hoover's popularity. CT and Sadaf, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, of course.
Thanks.
I'm delighted that you guys are here. Sadaf, I'm going to begin with you. It Ends With Us did great at the box office this weekend, $50 million debut. Not surprising, I think, considering it's based on a best-selling book. But besides Colleen Hoover's legions of fans, what makes this movie sort of a slam dunk at the box office, you think?
I can't believe I'm going to say this because I thought I would completely despise it, but I actually did not hate it, which does not sound like a glowing review.
No, it does
but
not.
I thought it doesn't, but I thought it was solid. I thought it was fine. Mind you, though, I haven't read the book, which I think is important to note. I know so much of the marketing kind of suggested that it was more of a rom-com than a picture about domestic violence. I was relieved to see when I watched it. I felt like it was actually more about the drama side of it. It did touch pretty well, I thought, on the domestic violence. I don't know that everybody will agree with me, but I will say I think more than anything, it's a soap opera. And in that context, within that genre, I think it definitely accomplishes what it's meant to be. The performances are fine. I feel like it touches on generational abuse and violence, and that's interesting to see. Some cast, there are some bits that don't quite fit and feel like they're in another movie, but I'm curious to see the sequel, and I'm disgusted with myself for saying that, but I am.
First of all, I forgive you. You're totally allowed and fine. But second of all, I want to get back to the marketing of this movie in a moment because I think that is its own separate and worthwhile conversation. I want to follow down that thought. But CT, you read the book. You read It Ends With Us and the sequel, It Starts With Us. You didn't really like either of them. I commend you for reading a sequel, even though you did not like the first book. Did you like the movie better than the book by any chance?
Yeah, I think it's always really interesting when you see creators try to kind of stay to the true nature of a book. And in this case, because the book is so bad, I think it was pretty hard for them to mess it up. And I say that with full respect for Colleen Hoover. It was written, it was published in 2016. So even as a writer to writer, I'm sure that if she could go back, there were things she would change about It Ends With Us.
Yeah.
I hated the books. I thought the movie was neutral. You guys made me watch it, so I watched it.
Me too.
I am obsessed with the sentence, with all due respect, I hated the book. That's just fantastic. Thank you so much for bringing that into my life today.
You're so welcome.
Sadaf, I think that the trick that is the movie's trying to pull off is that it sort of does. It is marketed as a rom-com, sort of it's positioned as this rom-com, but then it sort of transitions from this classic rom-com story into this drama about domestic violence. Colleen Hoover has been pretty open about how this book has been based on her own parents' abusive relationship. Talk me through the lens that we witnessed this story through in the movie.
Yeah, so this is the bit that I quite liked. Again, I'm not sure everyone would agree with me, but I think, we have the first half where we get to see Blake Lively's character fall in love with Justin Baldoni's character, which is the one that ends up becoming an abusive relationship. I think that's effective just because the audience will also start to fall in love with him and fall in love with the relationship, and you get swept up, and it's this great romance. And then in the second half, we start to see what happens when it actually turns abusive. And in the beginning, she's convinced and she's manipulated by this guy. And she's also, I think, probably clouded by her love for him. She sees these moments as quote unquote accidents, right?
Hmm.
And then it's only when she has an epiphany, she starts to realize, actually, wait a second, I think this guy's been playing me a little bit. I think I've been manipulated into seeing it this way. And she starts to realize how the abuse has actually been unfolding pretty intentionally. And
Hmm.
I think that's a great device to use considering who the audience is, which is a lot of really young women who
Hmm.
probably don't think about that a lot and how that might unfold. And maybe a lot of people who also subscribe to that question of, well, why don't the women leave? Why isn't it just that easy? Because as we know, it's more complicated. For Colleen Hoover, she grew
Yeah.
up with an abusive father and he abused her mother. She's talked about this quite a bit, actually, and she saw some of it, but she didn't know the extent of it until she got older. So she had a lot of questions about why her mother stayed as long as she did, why she eventually left. We get to see that mirrored in the mother daughter relationship in the movie,
Hmm.
which explains to me why maybe I did like it, because I think you can see that there's some authentic connections there, which quite work, I think.
It's interesting that you use that you sort of describe that as a device. The idea that this first bit of it is played as a rom-com or sort of presented as a
Yeah.
rom-com, so that you as an audience member maybe get swept up in and invested in this relationship. CT, the director of this movie, is also one of the stars of it, Justin Baldoni. He's been praised a lot for his pretty sensitive portrayal of an abusive relationship in this movie. How'd you feel about his approach?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is a fantastic actor. I think he's done some really nuanced interviews about the movie itself. I also think stuff what you're saying is so right. Like as a narrative function, it totally makes sense and is also super effective when we're kind of portraying a situation where, like, look, not all abusers are going to be ugly. Like hitting your wife does not suddenly make you unattractive. It doesn't make you any less of the person that like someone married. So it can be really insidious when you're in an abusive relationship, especially if in these kind of trope heavy situations, all of the abusive men are portrayed as, well, you should have known,
Mm-hmm.
or this man had red flags from the beginning. So it's very smart to be like, especially in Colleen Hoover's case, in It Ends With Us, she's married a doctor. It's not like,
Mm-hmm.
he's some dude she met at a bar. Like
Mm-hmm.
she's married a very highly respected doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and so she thinks everything is fine, and then it's not. So I think the narrative device works really well. I think my problem is not leaving it as a narrative device and instead
Mhm.
allowing that inclination of calling it a rom-com to kind of convince more people to sit down and watch the film.
Mm-hmm. Okay, again, I want to come back to that in just a moment, but first, let's get into the Blake Lively of it all. I think that's a worthwhile sort of arc here. Blake Lively plays the lead. She plays Lily Bloom, Lily Blossom Bloom, who owns a flower shop, which is too much. Colleen Hoover, don't do that. But this is also Blake Lively's first film as a producer. Sadaf, this movie feels like it's kind of setting up this next phase, maybe, of Blake Lively's career as someone who's has a bit more creative control over her projects. What did you think of her performance and her debut as sort of a producer slash maybe, the attention rod of the movie?
I just enjoyed Blake Lively, to be honest, a little bit. I was a Gossip Girl fan. I don't know that she's talented, but I enjoy her presence. I think she's quite charming. She has great hair. She's gorgeous. By the way, I will add to CT's point, Justin Baldoni is distractingly, overwhelmingly gorgeous. So that adds to the getting swept up, and
Sure.
so is Blake.
Yeah.
Just saying, important point. But I will say this. I went to see the movie at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night, expecting it to be completely empty, just me.
Yeah.
I walk in, it's 70% full. I'm the only person of color in the room.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of white teen girls. They're all in like matching sweats. They're with their moms. They're having so much fun. It was sweet to see, but I also remember thinking, this is Blake's demographic. This is Colleen Hoover's demographic. I remember one girl, as I was walking out, she was saying behind me, she was like, oh my God, I loved it so much. I experienced every emotion there is that a human can feel. Yeah, this is it. At this age, when you're in that era, this is who her audience is, and Blake knows that. And I think she and Ryan, and I know CT can probably speak to this really well, they've really branded themselves as a power couple who put themselves out there like this, and it works for them and it works for who their audience is. She's had the same people since the Gossip Girl days. If she wants to adapt more Colleen Hoover, there's endless titles. She'll probably be in the sequel. She should direct, produce. It's easy. It's lined up.
I will say Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds had the first married couple #1 and #2 movie in the box office, I think for the first time in 37 years or something like that. Last time it was like Demi Moore and Bruce Willis. So it's been some time since we've had that. But CT, like, this is the stuff I want to get into because I'm having some trouble with this. Blake Lively is, of course, a marketing genius. She sort of knows exactly how to position this movie, knows how to position herself. But what she's trying to do is create a cinematic moment, not unlike Barbenheimer, right? She's been stepping out in all these sort of like floral dresses, trying to invite people to do the same and showing up to this movie. But this is a movie about domestic violence. Like there's sort of a discordance between the way you market this movie and try to create a quote unquote moment out of it and what the movie is actually about. It feels like there's a bit of distance between how Blake is positioning it and what this movie is trying to even do. So why has the marketing for this movie been so fraught, you think, CT?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you said it right there. I think marketing a movie about domestic violence is hard. One of the ways you don't do it is encourage everyone to dress up in matching floral dresses and, come bring their friends and call it, the girly pop movie of the season.
Yeah.
I think Blake Lively is very smart. And when we were talking about the idea of her as a producer, like, when you consider all of the other ways that, very, very famous women have kind of extended their reach in pop culture by taking over the book space. I mean, you have Reese Witherspoon with Hello Sunshine. Like, this is a way for women to go from millionaires to billionaires very quickly while kind of introducing and maintaining, fan spaces. I think if you're marketing a movie about domestic violence, having fan activations, having pop-ups, influencer marketing, sweepstakes, encouraging women to run around New York and find signed copies of the book, while it will probably get, more people in to see the movie, I think it does like a major disservice to what the movie's end goal is trying to accomplish.
Well, I was gonna say, like, this came up during the marketing for the book too. What happened there when the book came out?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so one of the cool things about
Okay, go in.
Hoover,
Yeah.
I'm about to go off. Thank you so much for letting me cook.
Go off.
One of the craziest things about Colleen Hoover is that she had a major resurgence, like most authors in 2020. She released some of her books for free on Kindle Unlimited, and then people got hooked and started reading more things.
Yeah.
Because it was a major kind of IP moment in the book space, becomes very, very, quick for people to say, well, what else can we sell that's not just the book? Think of merch. I want to sell tickets to things. And so with Colleen Hoover, once It Ends With Us got very, very popular, Atria Books decided to release a coloring book based on the novel.
Oh no.
What?
Including famous quotes and themes. Not a lot of the pages were ever released, but the first one had a lot of like broken flowers and like vases and stethoscopes, and you can only assume that further in the book, since it's mostly about domestic violence, that the coloring book would also reflect that. I think one of the most famous comments, because obviously people hated this, was like, oh, thanks so much. Now I can color in Lily Blossom Bloom's bruises. Like, I really needed that, Coho. So people just found it really disrespectful. And I think it speaks to kind of this like discordant nature of the book itself.
Yeah.
You are reading this book and you're like, I love the romance. And also it's important, to talk about domestic violence. Colleen Hoover does it in a very trope heavy way, which lends the book to being seen as a romance first. And then when people see other activations, they're like, wait a minute, seems kind of weird that I'm attending this pop-up about a woman who escapes her husband, like hitting her. That seems odd. I don't love that.
Yeah, listen, you said thank you so much for letting me cook, and then you cooked. I appreciate that answer. That was very thorough. Sadaf, I want to maybe close with this kind of real quickly. I want to talk a little bit more about Colleen Hoover as quickly as you can. She does have her beloved, followers on TikTok. She has these legions of fans, but also she attracts not just critics, but people who are like haters. Colleen recently said in an interview with Texas Monthly that she's had writer's block for more than a year because of this intense criticism that she attracts. What is it about her writing, you think, that makes people so polarized?
Okay, I'm sorry I'm gonna do this, but I'm gonna quote the legendary Omarosa and just say Colleen gets to walk around and be mediocre and still get rewarded for things.
Oof.
And I think her writing
Okay.
is quite basic, it's quite contrived, it's quite sugary. And I think that's one of the big critiques that a lot of people have because she does so well despite this. And I think you could even say something similar about Blake Lively or even Ryan Reynolds. They have these very sort of sterile reputations. They can put out content that's not super miraculous or great, but because they have the reputations they do, they're easy to digest. They can win. But I think the part that bothers me about it, I think it's also a genre that often gets written off because it has young women who love it. And it's written off
Hmm.
as chick lit, and YA gets written off too. And I think that's really unfair. Historically, anything that young girls love is trashed. And I think that's BS because young women actually decide what ends up doing well and what ends up trending and what shifts the needle. So we should pay attention. And also, by the way, kids are reading. So I'm not mad. I love to see that kids are reading. That's great. So that's a good takeaway. I'm okay with it.
I appreciate both of you guys being here. I appreciate how spicy this got. CT and Sadaf, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being here.
Of course.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having us.
Of course. CT Jones writes about internet and pop culture for Rolling Stone. Sadaf Ahsan is a freelance writer and co-host of Frequencies, the Reheat podcast. It Ends With Us is out in theaters right now. I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. This is Commotion. The third season of Industry just came out on HBO. This is a show that has everything. It has greed. It has ambition. It has sex. It has drugs. Like a lot of drugs and a lot of backstabbing. And it's all set in London's financial sector. Listen, Industry's built up this cult following these past couple of years because of scenes like this.
I got an email about a girl on your desk dealing with embezzlement and a missing daddy.
The press want a public face for this scandal.
I needed my friend, and you used me.
Does it appall you that I have somehow managed to make it on my own?
Everyone's collateral.
We hold the line. Where's your stomach?
I hope you all enjoy feeling your flesh sear in the hell you've created.
That's just a bad time. That's all what that is. That's a bit of what to expect in the third season of Industry. Catherine Van Arendonk is here. Catherine, what's good, friend?
Well, Industry is good. I think that's why we're here, right?
And listen, I have to say, when you hear the sentence, everyone's collateral, you go, this is a show about bad people, which it is. For people who are not familiar with Industry, can you just tell us a little bit about what the show is?
Yeah, so the premise of Industry is it is a show about a bunch of young, very ambitious, very amoral financial traders who they work in London. Many of them are British. One of the main characters, Harper Stern, who's played by Mahala, is an American, and her direct boss, Ken Leung, is the actor who plays him, Eric. He's also American, but generally it is these kind of British or European, young, just incredibly thirsty people who are willing to do literally anything they can to make billions of dollars as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's that sums up all of Industry. There's nothing. I don't feel good when I'm watching this show, I should tell you. Like, I feel like I'm somehow complicit in watching a bunch of bad people and maybe even encouraging them a little bit because I'm not rooting for anybody. And I love a show that has that dynamic. Do you want to talk about this season and where we find ourselves? Because there's a bit of a slightly different focus to the season than the past couple seasons.
Yeah, so the first two seasons of Industry are really focused on Harper, who is our entry character in the beginning because she is an American. And so that gives you a little bit of a sense of like fish out of water in this place. But sort of the foundational tension of her is that she has this job based on a lie about her resume. And so there's this real anxiety about whether, when, and how this will come out, which inevitably it will, and how that will affect everything. By the time we get to the end of season 2, Harper has made many terrifying and very ambitious moves that has ended her in a specific place in opposition to other people that we've been following the whole time. And by the time we get to season 3, a lot of it is now centered around Yasmin, who has been working with, or at least adjacent to, Harper this whole time. And Harper and Yasmin end up circling each other for much of season 3 about who is going to really have the upper hand in this new power dynamic.
And what a delightful circling it is. Okay, I want to talk about the fact that Kit Harington, formerly of Game of Thrones, has been introduced. He's made his big debut on Industry on Sunday. Kit Harington back on HBO, baby. How are you feeling about his return?
I think it's great. I mean, I think already in season 2, they were starting to do this. Jade Duplass sort of comes in season 2 and plays this sort of important new energy outsider figure.
Yeah.
And Kit Harington's role in season 3 is similarly like, all right, we have to create some new energy, some new dynamic. We bring in this figure. He plays a CEO of a kind of environmentally focused company that is trying to go public, and but then everyone is realizing that actually the whole thing is a giant house of cards. I almost said a much worse word, and and so then he's like a baby man, which allows them to satirize a lot of what's going on with these like financial idiots that somehow end up ruining everyone's lives. But the thing about Kit Harington is that he is also this indication of HBO being like, guess what? We're going to put money behind this show.
Yes.
We want to draw attention. We want people's eyes on it. And one way that we can do that is be like, remember this guy? Remember how much you liked him? He's here again. You know?
I'm glad that you brought that up because before the season, Industry had maybe the worst time slot in HBO's schedule. They had the Monday night time slot, you know, famously the night where nobody watches television. And it did well. It did well, it sort of built up its own following. But now the idea that it would return on the 3rd season on Sundays at 9 p.m. That's as big as it gets for HBO. That's the prime real estate that they have. What do you make of Industry's, you know, sort of trajectory from probably the worst time slot that HBO has to offer to, hey, we want you to pay attention to this show? What do you make of that journey?
It says 2 things at once. One is that HBO has actually not had a lot of luck filling in its Sunday night 9 p.m. time slot in the last couple months. Yeah. What is the last thing you watched on HBO at 9 p.m.? I mean, so we have House of the Dragon, a big deal, an important deal. Before that, Regime. Nobody liked the Regime.
Nobody liked the Regime.
The Sympathizer, they really were hoping that was going to catch on. It did not. There was The Idol, which did catch on because everyone hated it very much. And so part of why Industry is now here is because it is a show that they have that is doing pretty well, that they can put in this slot and hope that an audience will come to it. But also, they would not be able to do that if the show were not also building a buzz, right? If it were not already well positioned to kind of move into the big leagues. Please don't ask me to do a sports metaphor, but that one seems right? Like it was like
a step up, a larger league, yes.
Right. It was well positioned because it has a better budget in season 3. They have these kinds of casting moves, and because there has been a real energy among the like New York gays who really push a lot of the like, this show is actually good, we should all be watching it kinds of things, kinds of narratives.
I got like maybe a couple of minutes left here, but also I want to talk about what is to me a sort of significant journey is that HBO also seems to be signaling that this might be a show that continues on for a while. And we haven't had one of those for a minute. Like we were talking about this before we started the show, which is, there are movies and they do the movie job. And then there are television shows and they should be television. They should expand and spend some time with us so we can get to know these characters. Do you sort of forecast a long life for Industry? Because it seems to be positioned for that.
I don't know. I'm sure it will depend at least a little on what the actual ratings are, how this season does. But if I had to guess, I would say that there's at least 1 or 2 more seasons in that show. Yeah. I mean, as I was listing off the things that they have been trying in this time slot in the last several months, House of the Dragon, a very big and popular show, also a continuing show. Yeah. Before that, The Regime and The Sympathizer, one-off limited series.
One-offs,
did not do well. True Detective is an anthology series, but had all of this juice going into it from people's familiarity with what that show was in the past.
100%.
And I really do not think you can overstate how strongly people want to have these long-term relationships with these characters, that is what makes this medium different from everything else. And I mean, that is like earned affection, earned attention that they can't get anywhere else. Yeah.
Give us television. That's what the people seem to be wanting. Okay, Catherine Van Arendonk, I got to leave it there, but I really appreciate your time, friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you so.
Of course. Catherine Van Arendonk is a TV critic at Vulture in New Jersey. You can watch, and I recommend that you watch, the third season of Industry, right now available on Crave here in Canada and HBO Max in the United States. Listen, that is it for the show today. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. You can find us on Instagram. We are at Commotion CBC. In the meantime, I will see you tomorrow.